Hi everyone, Ben here. I've been doing a lot of Blender tutorials lately, but I also use Syntheyes a whole bunch, and I recently started getting into the geometric hierarchy tracking, which is absolutely fantastic. I mean, it's, for me, I think for a lot of people, this is just going to be a game changer, kind of like how planar tracking just really opened up the doors to a lot of things. Russ has some great tutorials that he's created. Russ Anderson, who the founder of Syntheyes, has done a great job with this sort of thing. I just wanted to take this to the final step, which is bringing it into Blender, which Russ is using in some of these tutorials, and do some actual visual effects work on this. So I'm going to run through this tutorial really quickly. If you want to know how to do this, you should definitely check out his tutorials and not this one. So I'm going to add a shot. And I've got Russ's file here. And I'm just going to go crazy here. So we're going to go into the tracker. I'm going to lock that up. And let's find a good frame, which I think there was one around, around 60, somewhere in the 60s. That's good, 67. I'm going to turn off the grid because that annoys me. And I'm just going to right-click here and choose Creation Object Cylinder. And when you tell to create a cylinder, first you get it in the general approximate area. The first drag after you release your mouse button is for width, and the second drag is for height. So get that something similar to that. Hold the Control key. Again, I'm going really fast here, but I'll try to talk you through what I'm doing. Control key to make that a little bit similar in the angle. Maybe that's a bit much. Yeah, we're close. I'm going to go into the pinning toolbar. I need to pin this into it. Let me frame that up a little bit. Create edit pins, Control click. And first I'm going to be looking at these vertical lines because I know these are parallel vertical lines. I'm going to do what I can to line those up. Oh, and I totally forgot to do something. Field of view changes and height changes. I don't know if I can do that down the road. That might mess it up. Well, let's see. Let's see what it does. Never tried that before. Yet. I usually set it beforehand. And what I've been doing lately, and I don't know if this is allowed or not, but once I get to a point where I feel like it's looking good, I null out all errors and then I keep going a little bit. I don't know if that's going to mess with the calculations or not. I'm still kind of new at this. Now this cylinder is kind of on the inside lip of this white part, so I'm going to try to set my pins a little bit inside that white lip as well. That feels like it'd be a bit more accurate to the shape. There we are. Yeah, I think that's going to work. And now you can see it's my field of views around 50, which is, you know, anywhere in that neighborhood of say 40 to 55, 35. I mean, that's usually you're going to be pretty safe. Maybe I'll null out all errors one more time. So now that's pretty happy. I'm going to click on the GeoH toolbar. I'm going to just basically do what Russ tells us to do, which is click on the surface lasso and shift click on that object, which creates this tracking mesh. I'm going to unclick everything. By default, basically, if you just click this and tell it to track, it won't work because nothing is allowed to change with the track. So you have to unclick everything. And I'm tracking forward here, so let's track forward. And boy, that tracked really well. When I did this the first time, it didn't track well at all. I'm going to press Shift R to reverse my tracking direction, track backwards, and oh, looks like I'm getting some little jumps here. So I'm just going to move to maybe here, press the letter K to set a keyframe, advance a little bit. Oh, get some more jumps, get some jumps again. I'm just going to go through this and set some keys and go through it. I don't want to, uh-oh. Well, that's no good. Let's delete that key, figure out what's going on here. Set a key there. Maybe a key there. I'm probably keying too much. Sorry about that, Russ. Set a key there. Maybe another key here. In some ways, if you're into planar tracking, at least for me, this is a lot like planar tracking. You're sort of tracking the whole image, looking at the image. Okay, that looks fine just to my eyes. I'm going to press F7, take a look at my object tracking information, turn off this stuff because I can't make sense of it, turn off solve velocity for now, and I'm going to press the Shift key while I double click the zoom, which gives me a quick view of this. I'm looking for anything really funky. I mean, maybe right there around frame 63, but probably not. Yeah, I think that looks okay. There may be a little bit of a jump, but I think we're going to be okay there. All right, so I'm going to save this, and I'm going to call this Oats HD Russ face. Why am I calling this Russ face? Because I have a plan. Okay, so this is sort of about how far we got in Russ's tutorials, and I want to, again, take it to kind of the next level. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into 3D, and when you go into the 3D view, of course, you can see that we have created an object here, our cylinder, which is going to move around. And our camera is static. That's how this shot was set up, which is fantastic. It'll work really well. With my cylinder selected, I'm going to check the Create Texture box. Again, under the 3D panel, I'm going to click the Texture panel. I'm going to click the word Set, which lets me tell it where I'm going to save it. So I'm going to say Oats HD Russ Face. I'll just call it that. Bitmap image is fine. And these resolutions should be fine. And one thing I do, whenever I do planar tracking, this is something that I do. I may as well share it with you. I choose average pixel, and I'll just run an average pixel texture control for the entire shot. And it gives me a quick sense about on how well my track has worked. If it's a bad track, it's not going to look good at all. Here's the... Let's see, what am I doing? Here is the texture I just extracted. And what you'll see is that the face of the Quaker Oats guy looks really, really good. And that's the front of my cylinder. The back looks nasty because there's nothing back there. So it's sort of projecting the texture through and stuff like that. And that's getting scattered all over the place. It just doesn't have any information. But the Quaker Oats face is looking great. So that shows me that I have a nice track. As I get further to the edges, it gets a little blurry, which is a less accurate track. So when it gets into these areas here, there's a little more sliding, but you know, it's not a lot of sliding. It's just a little bit of sliding. These triangles up here are due to the fact of how it's unwrapping all these individual faces that are creating this mesh. So now that I've done that and I feel good about that, I'm just gonna disable create texture at the beginning where it had a keyframe for creating the texture. I'm just gonna find a moment where he's kind of, there's reasonably good lighting on it. Let's see, that looks pretty good, kind of in the middle. So maybe we'll just, maybe right there. So maybe I'll start it here, go forward a few frames, and undo it. And I like to do average pixel if I have a good track. I find average pixel does a good job. So I'm going to click run again, and I'll go back into here, and this is my updated one. It's a little less blurry. You'll notice there's more stair stepping here because it's taking fewer samples because I'm doing it with fewer frames. Okay, I've got that taken care of. I'll uncheck create texture there. And now I've got a texture that is applied for this mesh. Now I'm going to send this to Blender. So I'm going to go File, Export, Blender, Python, Russ Face. And we are going to just call that Oats HD russface.py. And I'm going to leave everything as its default settings. I'm going to go into Blender. This is 2.76, the latest version of Blender. If you haven't used Blender before, you're probably going to get Blender Render as your default engine. You can change your engines up here. This isn't really, I'm assuming you know how to use Blender. Let's put it that way. If you've never used Blender before, this is not going to give you everything you need to know to do this. I'm going to go kind of quickly because there's a lot of steps. But first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the text editor. Okay, you can just click this and press the letter T to get straight to it. I'm going to do that from now on, do shortcuts. Press Option O. So Option O brings up the ability to load in this Python script that was exported from Syntheyes. And I'm going to press Option P to run that, Option P. And right away, you'll see Russ's face appear. I'm going to click on this guy here, press the letter W again, so I can look into my scene. This is with the Blender renderer, and I am going to use cycles. So one of the catches here, the way this is working, is I'm pressing Option Z to get to this point, or Alt Z. My camera, which is too small, so I'm going to click on my camera icon here and not change the size of my camera sensor. By all means, do not do that, by no means. But under display, I'm going to up my size so I can see where that camera is. There we go. And so what Syntheyes does is it creates a background, basically a plane, with the movie texture applied to it, and it parents that to my camera. So if my camera were to move around, the plane would move with it. In this instance, the camera isn't moving at all. Only the Quaker Oats cylinder is. So that's moving around with him while he moves. Cycles is not set up exactly. These textures are Blender render textures and not Blender cycles textures. So I'm going to go into the cycles render engine. in my outliner, under camera, parented to the camera is the screen, I'm going to disable that both in the viewport and in the renderer. Make sure you do both. And I'm going to press the letter N in what I have as my camera view. I always like to have one window that shows my camera view, or the as final version as I can get. Check background images, add image, and if I can find that there, 0, 0. And if I'm not mistaken, there are 91 frames. Is that right? Yeah, 0 to 90. So if I expand this over, number of frames, 91. And whenever you're working in Syntheyes, I'm not exactly sure why, I always have to set the offset to -1 for things to line up. So now, one more thing, set the opacity to 100%. Okay, so now I've got not my Quaker Oats texture, but just a grayscale texture here. I'm going to click on that, press the space bar, and type smooth, shade smooth, and that can sometimes backfire on you. Here it doesn't because my meshes are not all joined together. There's kind of a mess in the mesh. So I like to select all, press W, and choose remove doubles while I'm in edit mode, which I got to by pressing the tab key. I've removed a number of vertices. I didn't actually pay attention to how many I removed. Let's see. I removed 109 vertices. That's a lot of vertices to remove. But now having shaded smooth, I've got kind of these ugly intersections of faces, which means I need to go here into my object data window and enable auto smooth and set that angle to something less than 90. I usually choose about 70. That means any angle that's greater than 70, it's going to give it a sharp edge, and everything else, it's going to let it be smooth. Okay, so here we are in our shot. I can preview that down here if I'd like, and I can always shift space bar, maximize that on the screen. Now we're going to do our textures. So I'm going to go into my node editor, clicking on this, press the letter N, or go to node editor, select my cylinder and choose use nodes, shift A, texture, image, texture, and already loaded is Russ's face. I'm going to load that into the diffuse, and of course this isn't Russ's face, is it now? But now I can see it in there, and if I press Shift Z, I'm actually into the cycles shading mode, okay, which gives me a nice canister that I've gotten. It's a little dark, you'll notice that. Hopefully you notice that. It's not as light as it should be, and the reason for that is because I have a lamp, which I'm going to delete because it has nothing to do with this space. It's not the correct lamp or anything, and which might make it even a bit darker. But the trick is I don't actually need to light this. It's already got shading on it for the most part. I know Russ is moving this Quaker Oats can around, and that's going to cause some different shading. But really, for the most part, I can just change this to an emit shader. So I'm going to go shader, emission. I'm going to run the color into there instead, and run this color into surface, and now I get something that is more appropriate to the space. Now, how do I get this to actually composite over the image? Well, I have to make sure I'm using transparency. Blender I think they should do this by default, but they don't. Under the film tab here, under the render settings, you just have to check the box that says transparent, and now we can see that going on right there. Now, this is just a render preview window. It's not the final render, but it gives you a good sense of what's going on, and now we've got him holding this Quaker Oats container as it moves around. Okay, that's a good start. I'm going to click on my, what is this called anyways? Let's see, click on my current editor type. Okay, I'm going to press the letter E to go into my image editor and select that Russ face. You'll notice that it's black here. I get this little black bar, and that's because it's creating some transparency on the edges, which I really don't need, but I've got them. Really what I need to do is edit this image a little bit. So let's go into Image, Edit Externally. For me, that's going to open Photoshop. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is we should open up a shot of Russ's face. I mean, we're calling it Russ's face, right? Let's find a good shot of Russ's. Oh, that's a nice shot. So let's open frame 53, and let's use our lasso tool and just cut out Russ's face. Let's make sure we get the chin and everything. And I'm going to copy that, close that window, and you guessed it, we're going to paste Russ's face right in here. And I'm just going to speed up this section real quick. I'm going to stick Russ's face right over our Quaker Oats man, and we'll make Russ be the Quaker Oats Russ man, the Syntheyes Oats man, or something like that. Okay, there we go. Oh, that's fantastic. Okay, so we're going to save that. I'm just going to save that as a JPEG image. I will call it Russ Face 2. Okay, back into Blender. Image, Option O to open that, and I'm going to bring up Russ Face 2. I didn't actually have to do that, I suppose. What I really need to do is to go into my node editor and change here, Face 2. And now we have Russ holding this Quaker Oats can, and his face is on it. There you are, Russ. That's fantastic. That's really fantastic. Okay, are we done yet? Well, sort of. This is kind of a tutorial on things. I mean, if I go to render this in cycles, all I get is the Quaker Oats container, so we need to do some compositing. And then we're going to do a little more trickery that's just fantastic. So we're going to go into the node editor. I'm going to click on my compositing nodes and tell it to use nodes. And I'm going to press Shift A, input image sequence, and I'm going to choose my Oats 91, start with 0, and wonderfully, by default, it actually sets everything up, though it does set my start frame to 1, and I want my start frame to be 0. I'm going to choose color, alpha, over, and in Blender, over is actually what is under. One of the strange things about Blender. Every program has its quirks, and I think that is one of Blender's biggest quirks, that it does it that way, but at this point, I wouldn't change a thing. So we're putting the Quaker Oats canister over our base plate, which actually means it's under, and run that into the image, and you'll notice right away that it's way too large, and that's because I am rendering this. My dimensions are set to be 50% of 1920 by 1080. Does that mean I need to re-render everything? Well, you could, but you can also just go into Distort Scale and set the scale to be the render size. And that immediately sizes whatever gets piped through this to be the size of your render. And that's a great little node. That way I can scale this to whatever size I'm going to be doing, and it'll adjust it appropriately. Right away, you're going to notice that I've got this black bar here. The edges don't quite line up, and really I don't need to change the whole box. I only need to change where Russ's face is, and this is where I think we'll do a little work with some Blender compositing nodes. So here's what I think we should do. First of all, I'm gonna add one thing that I like to do. I'm gonna add a switch. What a switch does, and when I turn on the switch, it shows me what's in the on section. When I turn it off, it's in the off section. And I'm going to set this to show me the background plate by itself. So under the node tab, I'm going to set the label show BG plate. And that way, if I ever want to see the original plate and just compare them real quickly, I can. I'm really getting a kick out of this shot right now. Okay, so let's go back into Photoshop for a minute. Let me save this. I haven't saved this yet, have I? I'm going to call this Oats HD Russ Face. I'm going to go back into Photoshop. I'm just going to fill this little gap here with some kind of color that's close to what it was hoping it would be. You might want to be more careful when you do this sort of thing, but you know, I don't know if I really. I'm just going to select a color and put that in there. And I'm going to do the same thing over here on this side. Select a color that's right near the edge of this and put it in. Oops. Put it in. There we go. And looks like that edge is okay. Top and bottom, I'd probably like to do that as well. But what I'm really going to do here is I'm going to create a matte where we're going to see Russ's face, and we're not going to worry about the rest of the shot or the rest of the image for the most part. So I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to go into just select the brush tool, press the letter D to reset my guys, and make this kind of big and make it kind of soft. And I'm just going to paint, oops, and set the opacity 100%. I'm just going to paint over the spot where Russ's face is, you know, more or less, something like that. Great. I might even blur that a bit more, but for now I'm going to make another layer, put it underneath, and I'm going to fill that with white. I'm going to save this as again, click save, but instead of save this as Oats Russ Face 2.jpg, I'm going to do Oats Russ Face 2 underscore matte.jpg. And back into Blender and clicking on my my cylinder. I'm going to go back into my material nodes. I'm going to add another image texture, image texture. And I don't have it in here, of course, because I have to bring it into the project first. So here's my Oats Russ Face matte. Okay. So if I were to say run this right into the emission, if I can get to that, you'll see it just shows up like that. But what this is it's a directive. It tells Blender when to show this and when to show nothing. So how do you show nothing in Blender? Well, there's a shader called a holdout shader. And anytime it sees a holdout shader, it just creates pure alpha. So if I plugged it in here right now, you would see nothing. It makes it invisible, basically. So I'm going to mix my emission with my holdout shader by going mix shader, emission, and holdout. When my value is 1, 1 is pointing at the bottom, and 0 or black points at the top. We know that Russ's face area on this new texture we did is black, and so I'm just going to plug this color, which you can see here is the yellow dot. I'm going to plug this color into the FAC. And what that's going to do is it's going to show Russ's face where I had the black, and where I had white, it's going to point it to the holdout shader. Now I get this little halo around here, and that's partly because this is just a preview render. But what's nice about this is at this point now, I'm only rendering that one little spot that I really need to change, and the rest of it gets to stay with the original material that it was. So now I'm going to render that again. Let's go to a different slot so we can compare. Here we are with our new one. So if we compare, there's the earlier render. Here's our newer render. I just don't have these slight differences that are going to happen because I, did kind of a quick and dirty matchup of this object moving around. But it's close enough to make this face quite convincing of putting on his face. And if we go into our composite settings again, I can switch. There it is before and after. So let's take a look at this right now. I feel like it's a bit blurry. I know we blurred in, but the shot itself is kind of artificially sharpened a little bit. So we're going to sharpen that. We will do that under filter, which is kind of a weird name for it. Change that to sharpen. And let's see here. We are going to sharpen right here. That's obviously way too much. Let's sharpen it like 0.1 maybe. That looks like too much too. 0.05 might be good. Gives me a bit too much black there. Maybe. I don't know. Do I really care? Maybe I care. But not that way. Nah, I don't care. Control X that. Let's see, do I really care for that then? M. Yeah, I think that's too much though. 0.02. Yeah, I think that it's subtle, but it's good. It makes a difference. Okay, so there I've got Russ holding onto that can, and we'll just check another frame for fun. Let's render out that frame. And there we go. So now Russ is showing off his Quaker Oats with his own face on it. Let's set this back up to 100%. And in our, let's do a couple other things real quick. Our sampling. Sometimes you want to render up your render samples. I find it doesn't matter that much when you're using an emission texture, but I will nonetheless up it to maybe 50. And then click this little stopwatch so you've got some noise happening, animated noise. It'll be different each time. Other than that, for this kind of a composite, you really don't need to do much. So let's just set our output to be // meaning the same directory as our file, and we're going to call this oats hd russface.mov, and we will save this as a QuickTime file, JPEG 98. It's my favorite little codec to use. No need to save an alpha channel because there is no alpha channel here. And save that and press Control F12 to start that render, and we will let that guy chug away. Okay, the render is done. Bring it up and take a look at it. You'll notice as you look at this that as the lighting changes, like right here as the box gets lighter, the plate we've made of Russ's face has a little bit of darkness that happens over here. We could try to feather that a bit more, which might help a little bit. I like to do these composites in Adobe After Effects because it's just a little easier for me to have access to that sort of thing. I don't have to wait for the frame to render every time to check it. But as it is, this is great. I mean, most people wouldn't even notice that. And there's Russ showing off his face. The one thing I might have done that I didn't do was add a little motion blur to this. But boy, this was shot with a very, very high shutter speed, so you really don't notice it. So yeah, we'll keep it at that. Thanks, Russ, for bringing this new feature to us. And as a tribute, here is Russ's Quaker Oats, Russ's face on Quaker Oats. And look how happy Russ is about. I mean, look how happy he is. He's very happy to have his own face on a container of Quaker Oats. So gosh, I'm really thinking about changing that little spot so it doesn't. Well, we'll see. I might make some tweaks to this, but for the most part, we'll leave this as it is. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have a great day. Bye bye.